Challenge is going well. I'm going to ask all the questions we want. It's going pretty good. I didn't have protein to start with. This like first 4 days because we sold it all at the event. So I was having to improvise. I had some really awful shakes, and then I was trying to have this fast for breakfast. So it took me a second to figure something out.
That's right. I'll sit next to you. Trust me, my daughter.
Courtside seats might pay thousands of dollars in the right arena for something. Hillary, are you ready? Did you start? Oh, great, perfect, didn't know that. Okay, well, I'm glad you guys are all here, and we're gonna do a brief review and hopefully some encouragement, because usually right about now, we're day 9 of the challenge, or you should be close to day 9 of your challenge. And that's usually when people start to like flutter a little bit. So instead of waiting until like day 14 or day 20, let's have something refocus, but also we'll meet as a group like this, and we're gonna break up into small groups and just questions, and you get more personalized questions and answers and more personalized attention to some of your needs as well. So that's the plan. But when we go back to, if you remember when we met as a large group on, what was that day, the 27th, we talked about metabolism. And we said metabolism is the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life. So the things that we're interested in is, what do you need to maintain life? What does your body need, right? And then we went through cell health, and we talked about how cells produce energy, because energy is what's creating motion, and where there's motion, there's life. So energy is what's allowing you to move and be alive and active and well. And so how your cells create energy is a big deal, and it's the mitochondria is a part of the cell that makes energy. And that's when we walked through the demonstration where we said, this is what it looks like to use carbohydrates for energy, which would be sugar. So here's how we use glucose for energy and how we produce energy. And this is how we use fat for energy. My example of fat was the basketball, the bigger basketball. And my example for sugar was a little ball. So it's all just ringing about, making sense. And then we said amino acids or protein is not normally what you use for energy, but you need that for the chemical processes. You need that to process the nutrients for energy, and then you also need to build things, and to build cells and build organs. And so those are very important. So you need all of those things, but in different varying amounts. And then we said, well, here's a challenge. Here's how we can create a challenge that will support this process in your body. Right? And the goal is that you're learning to use fat for energy. You're helping your metabolism reset, because most people don't have long enough breaks from carbohydrates to really heal. And so we have to be intentional to do that, and then you can get back to going back and forth from fat or sugar. But ideally, you're learning the systems to support your metabolism. So we said the picture is use that for a motivation other than just a scale. But then we were talking about 1 shake a day, 2 meals a day that are advanced plan, drinking half your body weight in water in ounces a day, 45-minute workout, doing your home care or getting adjusted or both. No cheat meals, no alcohol, and then also reading. And reading is a way to be self-motivated. And so if you ever feel like you need extra motivation, what are you reading and what are you listening to? And so listening to things that you want to improve on is a way to be self-motivated. So those are all things that we talked about. But the reality is you want to create systems, not just goals. So the 30-day challenge is a goal or a timing where you're just learning some processes. So the goal is for 30 days you do these habits, but goals are a problem because they're short-term, like this one's 30 days. They're low reward. They tend to be high stress because you're learning a lot of things that you don't normally, maybe things that you don't normally do, right? So any of you have a habit that you're doing different that's maybe a little bit stressful or a little bit challenging? You're like, I'm not every day 45 minutes, you know what I mean? Or like no meals, no snacks, right? Sometimes that can be a little bit stressful. So that early on, that's a high stress, right? And then goals are not lasting. They don't create lasting change, because in reality, you can do a really good job of this challenge, and at 30 days, you're right back to where you were. So that's a goal. And so being aware of that, we're saying we're having a goal of 30 days of a challenge with the hope that you're developing systems that will stick with you. Because what you're doing is you got 30 days of learning. You're learning how to do this, you're learning how to fail and how to succeed. And once you learn what works for you in these different areas, you can keep these systems and they can last longer. And systems are long-term, they're consistently rewarding, because every day you work this system, it's a reward for you. they create lifelong change. And so most of these habits are things that I just do all the time now because we've had so many challenges and events. I'm like, well, I've done it enough times before the event with everybody doing the challenge where I've had 60-day stretches of all this, where eventually I'm like, why don't I just do this all the time, right? And so ideally, like a lot of this becomes systems. So you fast forward a few years and we did a challenge like this, and you're like, that's not hard at all. That's kind of just how I know, right? And that would be a great way to do life. So just giving you something to shoot for with your systems that you're developing. Now, with that being said, they did a study where this professor had a classroom of people, and he was doing a photography, or he was not a photography, but he was doing they did it with photography and they did it with clay pots. But one of the studies did it with clay pots. And so this professor divided the room in two, and he said, this group, this half of the room, your grade, all semester, all I care about, how many pots did you make? I don't care if they're broken. I don't care if they're ugly. I don't care if they stand up straight. I don't care if they hold water. You just got to make as many as you can. I'm going to weigh your pots at the end of the semester, and how many you turn in is going to give you your grade, A, B, C, D, F, right? So get to work, right? And this group here, he said, you know what we're going to do for you guys is I'm going to grade you on one pot. I don't care how many you make. You could only make one. But you turn in one pot. I'm going to look at that. I want to see how nice it is. And based on how nice you made that pot, that's your grade. And he gave them the entire semester. And what happened was this group here didn't care how their pots turned out. And so they'd sit there and they'd spin it on the wheel and it'd fall apart and like, whatever, put it on the pile, that counts, you know? And then they'd try to make it like tall or make like a vase or something, and then it would collapse in. And they're like, yeah, whatever, that's on the pile. Hey, let me make a bigger pot because it's a heavier pot, right? And it wouldn't turn out right, like no big deal, that's on the pile. And they had a lot of repetitions. And this group here would sit here and think about it. And they'd say, I wonder how I can do this better. I should talk to somebody. Maybe I'll watch some YouTube videos. Maybe I'll ask a bunch of questions. Maybe I'm going to write out some plans, right? And they'd sit there and they'd do a lot in their brain, but they weren't doing a lot of repetition because they'd try to make the perfect pot every time, and then they'd struggle. And then they'd go back to the drawing board and they'd try again, and they'd struggle, but there's just so much processing. And at the end of the semester, this group had the worst pots. And at best, they'd make mediocre pots. And this group was turning in A+ work because they had so much repetition.
Oh.
They'd done it so many times, it was just easy to do it well. And so this group developed a skill, and this group over here thought a lot about it and had a lot of anxiety, right? And isn't that sometimes true how we do health? Well, I want to start exercising, but what I need to do first is I need to draw the perfect plan, and I need to have the perfect time and the perfect routine, right? And what you do is you think so much that you do nothing. In reality, we're like, I'm just going to get up at 5 and I'm going to start working out. What are you going to do? I'm going to start moving, right? If you just showed up and you started moving each day and then eventually like, maybe I need a better plan. I don't like just like doing this, you know? And you're like, okay, and then you start changing and you tweak it. But if you just consistently did that, eventually you'd be like, I found a routine that I love, right? And it's just from the repetition. And so we want is repetition. And so James Clear in his book called Atomic Habits, he talks about motion and action. And he says motion would be like this group here. Motion is searching and learning about something. So all you're doing is thinking about it, but you're not doing it. And you need to do that to create a plan, but there's only should be so much of that. And then the other thing is action, is actually doing it. And what you guys did was a whole bunch of action with your pots. And so there's a big difference. And they did the same thing with photography. They said, this group, you turn in as many pictures as you want, and I don't care what they look like, you can take pictures of your feet all day long. Or like, you could have the lens cap on and turn those in. I do not care, right? Just take as many as you can, turn them in. And this group, you say, you just turn in one photo. And at the end of the semester, this group is turning in killer photos. Because they'd go out and they'd snap pictures and they're like, that one's kind of ugly. I wonder if I tweak it like this. And they're like, oh, I didn't have the focus right. Oh, the lighting looks different here. I was just taking pictures of the sunset and they're all blurry, but I found if I did this, it's not blurry, right? And they figured out how to do it by accident just because they had enough repetition. And so you want motion, a little bit of it, but what you really want is action and a lot of repetitions. So what we're focusing on is not just the best approach, but we want to take action. So motion, here's something I thought was really cool. This is a quote from this book. It says, motion allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. So that's why we do it. Plan, but if I don't do it, I didn't fail. So I'm not risking failure. And what motion is doing is it's delaying failure. You're procrastinating failure. Right? If you want to master a habit, the key is repetition, not perfection. You need to get your repetitions in. And so there's a philosopher called Voltaire, and he said, the best is the enemy of good. Sometimes we don't do things well because we're so focused on doing it perfect. And so the goal isn't that you're perfect, it's you're moving in a direction that's better. And if you keep taking action in a direction that's better, you will start developing skills and you will start mastering things. Does that all make sense? And so you want it like, so as we're continuing this challenge, if you mess up, okay, fine, get another repetition in the next day. If you make a mistake, fine, get another repetition in. The repetition is where the habit comes. And then as you're like, God, why did I make that mistake? Like, how did that happen again? Then you might be thinking about it. And you're like, oh, maybe if I worked out at this time, I wouldn't mess up as much. Maybe if I drove this route home, I wouldn't make mistakes with nutrition, right? Maybe if I meal plan, I'd be more successful or less hungry, right? And you start slowly learning because you fail enough. Right? And so you really failure is just a step forward. And so the challenge is here to give you repetitions at better habits. And what we want to do is learn so that we can create systems that help for you. So you try and then you fail, and then you try and then you fail again, and then you try and you succeed, and then you try again and then you fail again, right? And then you try and you try and you try and you learn more and you find out what works for you and you get better. And so the repetition helps you get better. So eventually you start liking the habit, and then the habit is just a part of your life. Where you're saying, I couldn't imagine not doing this, right? That thing that you never thought you could do, now you're like, I couldn't imagine life without it. That's how you develop those habits. And so every time you fail, just remember it as a repetition. Like, okay, maybe not the perfect repetition, but it's one step closer to better, right? And that's really what you want to see. And so that's the goal of these challenges and what we're doing. When I pray with my kids at night, we always talk through, we say, what are you thankful for? Who do you want to pray for? Where would you like God to help you? And then where did you fail today? So one of our prayers is actually intentionally sharing failure. Like, oh, I made a mistake here. I got impatient with this person here. What'd you learn from that? Oh, great. That's awesome. That's how you learn. Awesome. Oh, I made a mistake here. I did this, this, and this, and I messed it up. And it's just like, okay, great. What did you learn from that? And then learning that failure is okay. It's just a top priority for me because I realize if they can be okay failing and making mistakes and being a little bit vulnerable, they're actually going to succeed a lot more. And so the same is true for all of us. It's like falling short didn't mean you failed, especially if you keep trying. You're just one step closer. So what we're going to do is we're going to break into small groups, and we're going to just sit down and we're going to go through questions on what's working, what's not, where do you need support, those types of things. But we want to just continue to help you process and keep taking action in a way that you're supported, but also that you can become successful with it all as well. Make sense? So, and you're going to stop that?
I am.
If you need a book to read through 10 pages, I'm reading Atomic Habits.